Hey guys, welcome back. So today we're out at the range with the new Keltec PR57. So what makes this handgun different in a growing field of 5.7 by 28 millimeter handguns? Glad you asked, because this thing is different. And it's going to be different in a way that some of you are going to be interested in, and it's going to be different in a way that some of you are going to be like, why would you do that, Keltec? But keep in mind, Keltec likes to push boundaries. They just don't accept that status quo, right? They're always looking at doing things differently, like the RFB, the RDB, the 12 gauge shotguns that they do, the KSG. They're always trying to do something a little bit different. Sometimes it hits, sometimes it misses, but this is interesting. So let's take a closer look at this. It is in typical Keltec fashion, mostly polymer, chambers 5.7 by 28. But it has that unique feature, which I'll show you here in just a second. So I got 10 rounds loaded of Federal ball, and Federal does supply the ammunition free of charge to the channel. I want to thank them for doing that. And so let's try this out here really quick and watch the recoil impulse. Very mild, like a little spicier than 22 long rifle, but not much in terms of perceived recoil. So the gun locks open last shot fired, but here's what makes it different. This is an actual clip, folks, not a magazine. It's a clip. Now, it may look like the gun has a magazine, and you can take the magazine out of it for maintenance. There's a pin back here, but no, it feeds through the top with a stripper clip, and it just pops in the top like this, and you just push the rounds down, throw the stripper clip away. I'll put it in my pocket. We'll talk about why I'm doing that in a minute, and then just load it and resume shooting. It holds 20 rounds. It's really small and concealable. Let's take a closer look. A lot of folks ask me, how can I get involved in the firearms business in that particular community? And one of the best ways to do that is to become a gunsmith. Every gunsmith I know is just overbooked with work. It's a very good living. And so if you would like to become a gunsmith, you need to go to a gunsmithing school or become an apprentice for an existing gunsmith. But Modern Gun School is an accredited college that also works with veterans in the GI Bill, where you can go and get a degree from accredited college in gunsmithing and then go out and start your own gunsmithing business, which I think is a really great option. Again, throughout my entire life, gunsmiths have always been able to earn a really good living, assuming they have a really strong work ethic. So please check out Modern Gun School. I do have a link in the video description below. One aspect of the PR57 that I like is the price point. Now, I can't get into the price here on YouTube because YouTube will try to accuse me of trying to sell you this handgun. I'm not trying to sell you anything. I'm just talking about it because I review products. But if you go out there and look, you'll find that the price on this is extremely attractive, especially when you compare it to some of its peers in the market. So 5.7 came about because of FN, right? The famous 5.7 pistol. Great handgun from the USG all the way up to the modern version that we see now that they've really refined the lines. And it's a good looking pistol, very nice shooting pistol. But for the longest time, that was the only game in town, and brand new, those things were really expensive. And so you started to see, after many years, other companies starting to make handguns and other firearms, even rifles, in 5.7. And that's how we get the price of the ammunition down, and that's how we get the cost of the guns coming down, that competition. And so we saw companies like Ruger, Smith & Wesson, PSA, they all started to make handguns that were way more affordably priced than the FN that kind of set the stage for the cartridge and the popularity. Well, then you enter Keltec, and they come in and they come out with the smallest handgun, the lightest handgun, and it has some unique features, right? But it's also one of the more affordable handguns. So now we're seeing that competition kick in, and that's making the 5.7 a bit more practical, right? The cost of ammunition still hasn't come down a lot, but it's slowly creeping down. PSA is making it under the AAC brand. They're making 5.7. We have some of that out here this afternoon. And so we're starting to see that happen, and that's a good thing. So shooting the gun, because it is so small, is actually quite pleasant. The cartridge lends itself to quick follow-up shots and stuff like that. It's a very low recoiling cartridge. So we'll talk about the ergonomics here. And the ergonomics are not great if you compare it to other handguns out there like a CZ or something like that. You'll notice it's very narrow, which is a positive, right? Especially for concealability. Very narrow. And keep in mind, guys, this will hold 20 rounds in that little, small, narrow grip. But even with my big hands, I feel like there's an airspace here, right? So it doesn't fill my hands, but it's not a bad grip angle, and it's not an uncomfortable setup. It actually points really, really nice. And so I can grab it quickly, get it into my hand, and I'm not struggling with it moving around. It seems like the texturing, which you can kind of see there, is aggressive enough where I can actually get a good grip on the gun. And then the top of it is just kind of round, kind of a throwback to some old World War II designs, but it has serrations, if you will, all the way around. And you'll also notice, this is kind of interesting, the use of roll pins, right? So it used to be that Kel-Tec would put screws all over everything. Now we're seeing roll pins in this particular gun. And so these should definitely stay put. You know, some people don't like screws because they tend to come loose, but you can always Loctite them. We do have the accessory rail down there. And it is set up for a red dot sight. So it comes with a mounting plate that will screw down right here. And so you can put a red dot sight on it. And then you can kind of see those sights that it ships with. And it's kind of interesting because these are molded into the slide, right? So they're not adjustable. But as you can see from my groups, I'm just shooting center of mass. The gun is zeroed. At least this one is. So if you're having a problem with it and it's not zeroed, you're just going to be able to put the red dot sight on there and run a red dot, right? All right, so we'll get into the operation of it and things like that here in a moment. Right now, I just want to shoot it a little bit. Which pocket did I put the ammo in? So loading it, the stripper clip. This little guy is 2 pieces. And this is one of my complaints about the design. I wish this didn't just fall out. We've already lost one of these. And so what happens is when you go to drop it on the ground, this little tiny piece, the slider that you push down the rounds with, can pop off and disappear into the growth on the ground, which has happened already. And then you're down that magazine. Now, the nice thing is the magazines, you can buy 10 of them, and they're under, you know, like 25 bucks or something like that for the magazine. So it's not like they're horribly expensive, and you will want to pick up extras. And that's for a 10 pack for 25 bucks or something like that. So they're not horribly expensive. But that is my one complaint about the system. Now, you have a locking toe in the front and this little nub in the rear, and you'll see cutouts in the slide. So basically just nose the front in like that and just push the rear down until it stops. And it doesn't really lock in. It just kind of helps you align it. And then all you have to do is push down on this little serrated piece, and the rounds go straight into the magazine. Now, you'll notice this little piece just comes right out. So I'd like to see an updated version where the piece stays in the magazine, so I'm not losing those, which I'm prone to do. Now, the slide will stay to the rear after you put the rounds in it, so then you can either hit the slide stop, which is only on one side, not the other, has no ambi features. No need for a magazine release because it doesn't have a magazine that drops out, so either drop the slide with the slide release or slingshot it like I just did. Now, the recoil on it is very mild, so watch the recoil. It's very quick recoil impulse. I can't even really feel the slide bottoming out. It's really smooth. It's really surprising given how small and lightweight the gun is. Now, it is a double action trigger, so if Jason can get back here, you will see the hammer come back as I draw. Let me line it up and get my head out of the way. You can kind of watch that hammer come back as I draw the trigger to the rear. See it coming back? I'm not aiming, so I'm just kind of point firing. All right, but it's also interesting to note the gun does not have second strike capability. So if it doesn't fire on the first shot, you can't just keep pulling the trigger like a true double action. You do have to run the slide to kind of reset the hammer, all right? Very smooth shooting. And here's what I'm talking about. So you'll see, when I pull the trigger, you'll see that hammer come back, but I can't pull it a second time. So it's semi-cocked, and the double action finishes the draw to the rear and releases the hammer, but you do have to cycle it to reset the hammer to the semi-cocked position before you can fire it again. Very pleasant shooting, very easy to shoot, plenty accurate enough. It's really interesting. So Jason told me, and rightly so, that in previous scenes I was calling the stripper clip a magazine. Old habits die hard. This is kind of the only modern handgun that uses a stripper clip I've used. Yes, you can go back in time to broom handles. They use stripper clips to load, but in terms of modern handguns, this is a little bit of an oddity, so pardon me if I accidentally called the stripper clip a magazine. All right, so with that being said, I did get some weights with the handgun, both empty and loaded. And so empty, on our scale, the gun tips the scales at 13.9 ounces, loaded with 40 grain ammunition, 20 rounds of the AAC. It was 18.9 ounces. So that's a very lightweight handgun, all right? So I'll throw those numbers up so you guys can see them. Now, one of the natural questions you're going to have is like, well, if you get the gun loaded and you want to unload it with a magazine-fed handgun, you just drop the mag out, run the slide, make sure the weapon's empty, and you're done, right? Well, this is a little bit different. It's not like an M1 Garand where you have a button on the side of the receiver you can just push and it'll eject the remaining rounds in the end block clip out. No, this is a little bit different. And so you have two options, basically, once the gun's loaded. Shoot it until it's empty, you just unloaded it, or two, run the slide until all the ammunition is out of the magazine. So that's what this would look like. I have some rounds in the magazine. And so basically you're just gonna, the easiest way is make sure it's pointed down so the rounds don't go flying too far, and then you just kick them out. Now, I do want to point out that while you're going through this process, or if you have a malfunction, the slide stop still works. All right, so there's a round in the chamber. I can eject that round and push up on the slide stop, and it will lock open. So I can, if there's a malfunction or something, I can still clear it and then reload the weapon. But, and they're going to lock open, letting you know that it's empty, and that's how you would unload the PR57. Let's go over some of the features and then disassemble the handgun and show you how that process looks. So first of all, I've already talked about the sights and things like that. I did want to show you the little armor mount bracket. So there's two little screw holes on top. This will just set on top and line up with those screw holes. Align it the right way. You bolt that down with the two provided screws and you put your red dot sight on top. As I've noted, it has serrations forward and rear. Has no ambi controls, no need for mag release. Slide stop, slide release is over here. Your serial number is through a little window here. Then you do have an accessory rail. And that's really it. You have that double action trigger. Again, about a little over 3 pounds, 12 ounces. Lightweight, concealable, very narrow. Feels pretty good in the hand. Let's take it apart. So make sure the weapon is empty. I'm gonna go ahead and let that slide go home. And then on the trigger, all you're gonna do is put your finger behind the trigger and push forward like that. And when you do that, you can just pull the slide off of the frame. You can set the frame aside, take out your dual recoil springs, just kind of push forward on the captive springs, full-length guide rods. There's them. This is your little cam piece. And then the barrel just lifts up and out. So that's fully field stripped. You can take a 1/8 punch this pin out, and then the floor plate will come off, the spring and follower will come out, and you can clean your magazine body very easily on the pistol as well. To put it back together, you reverse the process. We'll talk about why this barrel has these little stars out here on the end here in a moment. Set it in there. Make sure your cam pin is pretty much straight up. This little piece, this heavy line goes to the rear. And then push it all the way to the rear. Don't set it in there like this. You won't get it back together. Push the cam pin or the cam piece all the way to the rear. And that's what it should look like. You'll see these two little cutouts right there. They kind of look very similar to the rear end of the recoil spring. That's where the recoil spring's going to drop into the rear. So you take the two nose pieces. They'll kind of protrude out the front of the slide. Set them in there. Take your recoil spring, push it forward slightly, let it drop down, and then it'll catch that cam piece, and the whole assembly should stay together after that. Okay? Take your pistol, set the slide on top all the way forward, draw it to the rear. You'll see that the slide stop, slide release is kind of poking up. I push that down with my thumb. And then it will slide back to the rear, lock the slide to the rear, push forward on that trigger again until it clicks, and then the pistol is back together. Pretty simple. In all of our testing, we had 2 failures to feed with the Federal ball, just American Eagle stuff. But with every other type of ammunition, we didn't have any problems with the gun itself. We did have 1 failure, and this one did happen on camera. We had 1 failure to ignite, and we tried to hit it 5 or 6 times after the failure to ignite. It's just a bad round. So the AAC cycles the gun just fine. We had no failures with the AAC Federal ammo. We had a couple of stovepipes or failures to feed, and then the FN ammo generally is good to go as well. So one feature I didn't cover off on earlier that I just remembered, it does have a loaded magazine indicator, and that indicator is right here on the base of what would be the magazine, right? The floor plate of the magazine, which is integral to the design. And you can see that, and if I just push down on the follower of the magazine, you'll see there how they poke down. It normally look like that. I'm pushing it, hyperextending it, but it would normally sit right there, and you can just quickly glance at your pistol and see that it has a loaded magazine. Also, you do have a loaded chamber indicator right here on top. And so if you look down on it in sunlight, you'll be able to see. In the darkness, you'll be more hard pressed to check. So you can either check back here, check the witness hole, or of course you can just slightly push the slide to the rear, what's commonly referred to as a press check, and look for brass in the chamber. But that's how you would tell if the pistol's loaded or not. So the PR57, there's things about it I certainly like. The gun's very small, it's lightweight, it's narrow, it comes with everything in the box that you need to go to the range and start shooting, including a red dot sight mount, has a great trigger on it, holds 20 rounds in the grip, even though it's small and lightweight. So all those things seem to lend very nicely to a gun that you would carry for self-defense. Now, on the other side of that, people are definitely going to say that they dislike the whole concept of a stripper clip. They're going to say that they just rather have a magazine. And I get that. A lot of people are used to using magazines. I certainly am. And there's a number of different reasons why people might cite that. It's slower to reload with a stripper clip. If you have a malfunction or if your magazine goes bad, the spring goes bad, follower gets messed up in some way, you just switch magazines. Well, in this gun, the magazine is integral to the design, so it's not that simple. So clearing malfunctions and things like that would be different with this and potentially more difficult depending on the type of malfunction that you have. So people have already started talking about that on the internet. The other problem I've seen with the stripper clips, you'll notice this one's missing its little pusher. This is what the pusher looks like. And that's because they just kind of set in there when you load the magazine. When you're out in the field like we have been shooting it and you throw the magazine to the side, start resume shooting, that little piece can fall off and disappear in the grass, which has happened to me. So I definitely would like to see that changed, right? I'd like to see either those pieces made more difficult so they don't fall out on their own as easily, or make them so they can't fall out, design it so that they stay in there. And so that's something I'd definitely like to see in a future release of the magazine or the stripper clips. There I go, calling it a magazine again. Now, another thing I noticed about this is the vast majority of shooters are right-handed. I am, but about 13% of the population is left-handed. The stripper, the way it's set up, definitely favors a left-handed shooter because I can easily push this down from this side. As a right-handed shooter, the easiest thing for me to do is to switch hands, reload, switch hands, load it, and start shooting or resume shooting. And in a self-defense situation, that just slows things down. Now, you can rotate the gun to the side like this and then push the rounds in. Now, I have very large hands and very long, goofy thumbs, and so my thumb, if I hit the web of my hand, will come to the bottom, so I can kind of rotate in and still get those rounds in. Jason has much shorter, more normal sized hands and shorter thumbs that are more normal sized, and his thumb would leave 2 or 3 rounds left, so he would definitely have to go like this, which just makes it more difficult if you push the stripper clip one way or the other and don't have it perfectly lined up to go straight up and down. If you push it one way or the other, it'll bind and it'll make it more difficult to get the rounds in. So rotating it can be done with practice, but it's certainly not as easy as just doing this, which is more intuitive. So I think if you take a look at the design, it has the same cutout on both sides, right? So if you take a look, it's flat across the top. So my argument is make the magazine go from this side, so a right-handed shooter could just set it in there and resume shooting, right? So that would just be a simple stripper clip change, I think. But yeah, so that's one of the things I just noticed about the handgun. Typically speaking, because it holds 20 rounds, you're probably just going to load it, not carry a spare magazine, or in this case, stripper clip, and just call it good. And some folks would say that's a bad idea, and I get that. So that's just things to take into consideration. So the price is good. The guns are out there. I've seen them out there on the market already. I've had this one for several weeks, been shooting it, having fun with it. Recoil is manageable, very light recoil, impulse, the great trigger, just kind of lends to a very decent handgun. Also, I would like to see adjustable sights. Not everybody wants a red dot sight, right? Some people just want to be able to adjust their sight to get to 0, and I'm sure there are a few of them out there that aren't perfectly zeroed, but this one just happens to be out of the box. All right, with all that being said, do I like the gun? I do. I think it's fun. It's different. Is it going to appeal to everybody? Certainly not. A lot of people are not going to like it, but I think people like myself that have just about every gun under the sun, This goes back to things I've said many times here on the Military Arms channel, folks. You are allowed to own guns that are just simply fun to shoot. They don't have to serve a tactical or necessarily a practical purpose, although I do think this gun would serve a practical purpose. It just depends on how well you train with it and if you become accustomed to it. I think in that case, it would be just fine. If you guys have any questions about the PR57, you can ask those questions down below. Try to stick around for the first couple of days after a video goes live to answer any questions you guys may have. If you'd like to support us here at the Military Arms channel, please become part of our Patreon family. There's a link in the video description below. Also, right here on YouTube, you got the thanks and support button underneath the video player you're watching right now. You can mash either one of those buttons and help support us right here on YouTube in the age of demonetization. Thank you for 17 years of support. Swing by, check out Copper Custom. Thank you for watching. We'll talk to you guys soon.